What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So I'm going to go ahead and continue with this professional basketball's top 15 list for centers. I want to go ahead and do one more selection. And just to do a brief recap, of course, at number 15, I had Nikola Jokic. At number 14, I had the Chief, Robert Parrish. At number 13, I had Bob McAdoo. At number 12, I had Wes Unseld. And at number 11, I had Nate the Great Thurman. So at number 10, I have Patrick Ewing. All right? Pat Ewing. Let me say this before people, I guess I should wait until after the series is done, because I think some people are going to ask me where some centers are, and I have to explain them. They're a little bit lower on the list, and I give my reasons why. But anyway, Pat Ewing is at number 10. And you could argue that Patrick Ewing didn't quite live up to the potential, the potential and expectations expected of him when he was drafted back in 1985 by the New York Knicks. A draft that many people feel was rigged. I mean, it is what it is. But he still was one of the great centers of his generation. He was a tough out, obviously. He helped to revitalize the New York Knicks organization. Look, when he became the foundational piece for the Knicks, they were a mediocre to poor team. I still feel like a lot of his prime was wasted on bad rosters, mediocre coaches in some instances, and bad schematics and philosophies as far as how the team would be run. Like, he was, by the time Pat Riley became the head coach of the Knicks back in 1991, Pat Ewing was almost 30 years old then. He was 29 going on 30. So a lot of Patrick Ewing's best years were wasted. But ultimately, he still went to an NBA Finals. And you can make a strong argument, like a lot of players in the 1990s, if it wasn't for a guy named Michael Jordan, maybe Pat would have at least one championship. Maybe in 1993, who knows? Maybe they pulled an upset in 1992 if they were able to get by the Bulls. Who knows? But at the end of the day, a lot of players, you said, man, they should have won a championship, but Michael Jordan intercepted them. But Pat Ewing is regarded as one of the greatest centers of all times. And he played in an era, the last real era where there was some real quality big men left. When he came into the NBA back in 1985, the mid-'80s, you still had centers like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, even though he was getting older. Moses Malone, though he was on the downside of his career, but still, you had Moses, you had Artis Gilmore, you had Bill Walton lurking around, even though he was, injury prone and toward the end of his career as well. You had Jack Sikma, you had Tree Rollins, you had a good quality depth of big men still around in the NBA. Robert Parrish, of course, Bill Laimbeer, and others. But later in Pat Ewing's career, you had David Robinson emerge. Oh, I forgot to mention the King of Dream Olajuwon, the cream of the crop. But you had David Robinson emerge. You had Shaquille O'Neal, Alonzo Mourning, Dikembe Mutombo. So Rick Smits. So there were a good amount of big men in the NBA. And Patrick Ewing played for quite a while. I think he played 17 seasons from 1985 to 2002. The overwhelming majority of that time, 15 of the 17 years, He played the New York Knicks, and I believe he played 1 year with the Seattle Supersonics, and then 1 season with the Orlando Magic, where he was a shell of himself. He was born in, I believe, Kingston, Jamaica, back in 1962. Pat Ewing was recruited out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and which I believe is where he lived at the time when he was recruited out of recruited to college. He went and played Georgetown for 4 years, and he was one of the Georgetown centers that I mentioned. Him, Dikembe Mutombo, Alonzo Mourning, and anyway, he's probably the greatest. Gotta think about this. Yeah, I say he's the greatest Georgetown player in collegiate history as far as basketball. In the 4 years he played, 3 of them, the team reached the NCAA championship game. And in 2008, ESPN considered him the 16th greatest collegiate basketball player of all time. And as I said before, one of the greatest players of all time. And yeah, as I said, his family settled outside Boston and Cambridge, Massachusetts. And as a senior in high school, Ewing signed a letter of intent to play for Coach John Thompson at Georgetown University. And of course, he played 4 years there. And he was drafted, fast forwarding a bit, because I want to talk more about the NBA. He was drafted in 1985, and he was the Rookie of the Year. Matter of fact, let me read his accolades. He was 11-time NBA All-Star, All-NBA First Team 1989-90, 6 times on the All-NBA Second Team, 3 times on the NBA's All-Defensive Second Team. He was the 1985-86 Rookie of the Year, and during his rookie year, Patrick Ewing averaged 20 points per game, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.1 steals, 2.1 blocks, 47% shooting from the floor, and 74% from the foul line. He was on the NBA All-Rookie team in 85-86. He's on the 50th and 75th NBA anniversary teams. His number 33 retired by the New York Knicks. And of course, he is in the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. And he won Olympic gold not only in Barcelona in 1992, which was the first Olympics that professional players were allowed to participate, but he also won Olympic gold in Los Angeles as an amateur in 1984, along with some guy named Michael Jordan. Pat Ewing gave a lot of New York Knickers, I say Knickers. Well, I was referring to Knicks fans, but he gave a whole lot of New York Knicks fans hope that he would be the big man to rescue the franchise and bring them back to prominence. And while Ewing individually played very well for the New York Knicks, and they did try to put a team around him to be successful, for the duration of the 1980s, that wasn't the case for Pat. It wasn't the case for him. Now, individually, he did his thing. In 1989-90, Pat Ewing averaged a career high 28.6 points per game. But he averaged 28.6 points, 10.9 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 1 steal, 4 blocks per game, career high that year, 55% shooting from the floor, 78% from the foul line. But team success-wise, I think they went, I can't remember the exact record they had that year, but it was probably like 38, 39 wins or something like that. as I said before, they didn't have a lot of playoff success. In 1990-91, I remember they lost. Then they got swept in the first round by the eventual champion Chicago Bulls. But it was the next year when Pat Riley became the head coach of the team that they had this surprise run. That year, Patrick Ewing's scoring went down to 24 points per game, but that was because the team got better. His rebounding went up to 11.2 points per game, 1.9 assists, 1.1 steals, 3 blocks per game, 52% shooting, 74% from the foul line. But that Knicks team went 51-31 during the regular season, and during the Eastern Conference semifinals against the 67-win Bulls, excuse me, they went on to take that Bulls team to a surprising 7 games before being eliminated. The next year, Patrick Ewing averaged 24.2 points, a career high 12.1 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 0.9 steals, 2 blocks per contest, 50% shooting from the floor, 72% from the foul line. But they won 60 games, which tied the franchise record established 20 years earlier. And many people thought with the Knicks winning 60 games, the Bulls going down from 67 to 57 wins, that this might be the year that the Knicks overtake the Bulls as the best team in the Eastern Conference. And when they did face each other in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Knicks did take a 2-0 lead. And at that time, if memory serves me correctly, the Knicks were almost unbeatable at Madison Square Garden. I think they had won, going back to the regular season, something like 27 games in a row or 28 games in a row at Madison Square Garden. But that wasn't the case, them ultimately beating the Bulls. The Bulls won 4 games in a row. And the Knicks' win streak ended at Madison Square Garden, I believe in game 5. And ultimately, they were eliminated. The next year, though, Michael Jordan was retired, and Patrick Ewing took the Knicks ultimately to the NBA Finals, where they were still losing heartbreaking fashion in a Game 7, a close Game 7, I think it was 90-84 to the Houston Rockets, despite the fact that during that series, Pat Ewing only shot, I think, 38% from the floor, and Starks like 36%. They still were able to take that team 7 games. So, after that, they just weren't able to get it done, man. It was a slow decline, and with the Knicks. In '95, they were able to get to the semis, but they lost in 7 games in heartbreaking fashion to the Pacers. Patrick Ewing, heavily injured, bandaged up as far as his legs, wasn't able to get the lift he necessarily needed. Normally he would have dunked the basketball, but he laid it up, missed the layup as time expires. The Knicks were eliminated. That was the last game that Pat Riley coached the Knicks. And then the very next year, they had a down year, 96. Only won 46 games. In 1997, they won 57 games. They had a resurgent year. And it looked like that team was going to go to the Eastern Conference Finals and have a rematch with the Bulls because they had a 3-1 lead against the Miami Heat in the semis. But, as we all remember who watched that series, there was a fight that broke out, I think it was in Game 4, where there were suspensions that were handed out, but the suspensions favored the Miami Heat as far as the players who were taken out of the games. and that affected the series. And as a consequence, Miami was able to come back and win that series 4-3. It was because of the criticisms involving those suspensions during that series, which led the NBA to make the decision where if a player did a suspendable offense, committed a suspendable offense during the series, the suspension would not be until the regular season because it would affect the series. But afterwards, it was a decline overall in Patrick Ewing. The Knicks were able to have a Cinderella run to the NBA Finals in 1999, but they did it largely without the efforts of Pat Ewing, who I believe suffered a partial Achilles rupture, if I remember serves me correctly, back in 1999. And they lost to the Spurs in 5 games. By 2000, Pat Ewing was just a shell of himself, and he was traded to the Sonics, I think, during the offseason. And he spent his last couple of years as a role player with the Sonics and then the Magic. For his career, he averaged 21 points per game, 9.8 rebounds, 1.9 assists, 50.4% shooting from the floor, 74% from the foul line. And he will go down as one of the great players of all time. Some people, before it was fun to make fun of Charles Barkley, in recent years, I think back then Patrick Ewing was probably the most maligned of all of the stars because Patrick Ewing had a tendency, unlike Charles Barkley, to underperform when his team needed him most. He might come out, Ewing, and have a 26-point, 13-rebound performance, but the team really needed him to come out and put up 38 and 17 or something like that, 40 and 15. They needed a monster performance, and oftentimes that's not what he did. The monster performance would come from maybe Michael Jordan, or in some instances, even Scottie Pippen. So that was a knock on him, but still a great player. Tell me what you guys think. As far as, and by the way, I didn't really go into what made him a great player. I mean, Pat was able to refine his game as he got older. Pat always had a nice, smooth jump shot. He didn't have the biggest hands, and that sort of hurt him a little bit in some areas. He was not great at passing. He was not a great passing big man. Oftentimes, when you pass to Patrick Ewing down in the paint, the ball would just squirt out his hands, or he couldn't quite catch it sometimes because his hands were not. I mean, they weren't freakishly small like, say, Kevin Willis, but he didn't have the biggest hands, and that hurt him a little bit. Defensively, Pat Ewing was great. Pat wasn't exactly Akeem Olajuwon when it came to moves, but he had, Pat was an adequate, more than adequate big man when it came to scoring down low. But the thing that I remember most about Pat Ewing was he was one of the first big men to have that range. When he had it going, he was a force when he had that jump shot going. By the mid-90s, his range was consistently 18, 19 feet, which was something you didn't see all the time back in the 90s. You know what I'm saying? He could even, on a very few occasions, he can knock down a three-pointer. But I always got scared. Whenever the Bulls would play the Knicks, right? I always got scared when Pat would hit his first 2 or 3 shots. And he had that look. You know what I'm talking about if you're a Bulls fan. When he started having that lower lip hanging and shit, and he started acting a fool and shit, talking shit, I'm like, oh shit. Whenever Pat Ewing and Starks would hit their shots starting the game, I'm like, okay, this gonna be a dogfight. But anyway, much respect to Pat Ewing, man. Tell me what you guys think.